Hi there, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to a new tube radio restoration project. And this one is a SABA Meersburg W3. I have a particular fondness for this radio because it was one of the first big radios that I restored. I didn't put that on the channel. I then did a second one, which was also before I started the channel. So this is going to be my third one. And as far as SABAs go, there are a few more. So SABAs are amongst my favorite radios, and when you start looking at the details of this radio, you'll understand why. These things are monsters. They are way over-engineered, which is why I love them. This one I found on eBay, and it had a few quirks. It turns out there were a few more than I actually noticed at the time, but I'm not blaming the seller. I'm blaming my own enthusiasm because I just had to have it. So this is the first video in the series, and I'm going to take a close look at it, and hopefully by the end of this video we will know whether this thing works as a radio or not, because I'm going to go against a few of my rules and I'm going to power it up. Carefully, but I will power it up. So if this sort of thing turns you on, stick around, enjoy the video. But before I carry on, I want to thank the sponsor of the video, PCBWay. You'll find them at PCBWay.com. And they're the guys I go to for all my PCBs. They've got some amazing prices on prototype PCBs for you. And what I especially like about them is that it's so easy to get this thing done. You can upload a Gerber, go and select the number of units you want, choose the color you desire, and it'll give you an immediate quote as to what this thing is going to cost you. And with the pricing starting at $5, it's really great value for money. But I think this year I'm going to be doing quite a bit more than just PCBs. And for that, I'll probably be visiting their 3D printing services again, because I am definitely going to be looking at some slightly more exotic 3D prints with materials that I cannot print on my own. The other thing that I find interesting is some of the CNC machining, because sometimes I need parts for the radios that I can't create with the normal materials. So this might come in really handy. But regardless of what it is you're looking for, just look at the list of stuff they do. Whatever you need, I'm sure you'll find something that will satisfy your requirements. Well, this one came with a few surprises. There are a few bits of damage here that I wasn't expecting, that I didn't really see when I looked at the auction photos, and it's my fault, not the seller. I should have looked a bit more closely, but I don't think that if I'd looked more closely, I would have been deterred from buying it anyway, because I really wanted one of these. This will be the third W3 that I'm doing, Meersburg W3. And believe me, the previous one was a lot worse than this one. The previous one had a hole on here. This thing had actually cracked, obviously fell, and something pushed this whole section in. I had to fill it in with wood filler after pulling the wood out. And the way I got around that is I actually tinted this thing a lot darker than what it is here. I think it was walnut varnish. I actually really tinted it dark so you can't see the patch. And that radio is in a friend of mine's office, so I see it all the time and I don't notice it at all. So there's a lot that you can do with these radios. They're pretty repairable. A few things I did miss, and that is, well, actually, let me show you close up and tell you what I'm talking about. But first of all, look at the grille cloth. It looks in pretty good nick. It's in very good condition. There's no threads pulled out of it. There's a bit of a dark stain here, which is quite normal, but you can wash that off. The cloth is loose, so this thing will have to be stretched out again and glued in place correctly. But that shouldn't be a problem. This is going to come out perfectly. What I'm more worried about are the knobs and this trim over here. This gold trim is completely missing over here, so I'm going to have to recreate that. This is really when you need Dave Tipton. With all these tools, it would be quite easy. To me, it's going to be a bit of a task, but I'm sure I'll get it done. This is a sort of bronzy plastic, but it can be replaced with a little bit of a wood strip over here that's fashioned to the same shape. I'll see how I do that. And more importantly, the knobs have got a problem. This back knob is perfect. The bottom one is cracked and scratched. So this is going to have to be replaced. I think you can get them. If you look on eBay Germany, there are a lot of parts for these radios because people rip them apart to harvest the speakers, because the speakers are very sought after for full range systems. So they then sell these parts quite abundantly. But I think I may have one of these lying around on a donor body that I've got downstairs. I'm not sure it's not for the same model, but I'm not sure it'll fit here. We'll see. So this thing has got to be replaced, and the same applies to this knob, which is completely broken off and disappeared. Again, the back one is in perfect condition, just the front one needs to be sorted. And as for the functions, pretty standard. We've got the bass control here, which has a little window on there that'll slide up and down. It is sliding, but it's not going all the way. and this is pretty stiff. Magic Eye over here. We've got this thing on the top here, which is the ferrite antenna rotator, and you can see that that's what it's doing. It's making some noise in there, so it's obviously hitting something inside, but you can see the direction. You would point this wherever you get the best reception on long wave or medium wave, and you would have that as a reference. If you move your radio around, oh, this thing's coming out. I'd forgotten about that. I believe this switch is to switch in the ferrite antenna or switch it out. See what you discover when you play around with these things. I'd forgotten about that completely. But anyway, Magic Eye, ferrite antenna, direction indicator. We've got the knobs for off, phono. Oh, these guys are all loose. It's working, but the knobs seem to be cracked inside. I think we can repair that. This one's also in pretty bad shape. They're all clicking in, but I think the piano keys need some work. But we've got off, phono, long wave, medium wave, short wave, and FM. The glass is in perfect condition. The AM tuning is working. The FM is down there, and I can't turn it because that knob is broken. And then on this side, we've got the treble control, also with its own little window over here to indicate the position. That is turning as well, but pretty stiff. Cosmetically, this thing is perfect. It looks pretty good. These can all be polished. Yeah, this is going to come out very well. The only thing I'm worried about is reproducing this guy at the top. I'll have to think of something. This little strip down at the bottom, these strips are very common on these radios. You can actually buy them as strips for tube radios, sort of a self-adhesive strip that you have, and then you put clear lacquer over it. But that's becoming more difficult to find, and somebody mentioned you can get these in those shops that sell parts for models, you know, model airplanes and that sort of thing. So I'm going to have to find that, because I did buy some for the other two that are stored, and for another one or two radios that use them. I think the GRAETZ use them as well, but I don't have any more. Now, looking at the body, there are a few little scuffs and dings. Most of it is actually just on the lacquer. This, for example, and that is just the lacquer that's peeled off. The veneer is intact underneath, so that shouldn't be an issue. This radio is going to have to be stripped down completely to the wood, to the veneer. The biggest problem is actually at the top here. The veneer is actually stripping off here. This is not just the lacquer. So there are little holes on there. This thing can be stuck down, but there will definitely be gaps on here. I may have to fill this like I did with the one that cracked with wood filler, and then stain at least the top darker than what it is now to hide the repair. I think that'll come out quite well. If not, well, I may have to strip the veneer off and re-veneer it, which is something I've never done before, because it's very difficult to find veneer in Madeira, strangely enough. Madeira means wood. The word Madeira means wood, and there are so many parts of the wood that we cannot find here. It's unreal. So, the ironies of restoration. Right, I'm going to open the radio up and look at the inside, because I haven't seen it myself. So let's see what we're facing here. Maybe maybe this is just a part set. Who knows? I don't think so, because these things were built to extremely high standard, extremely high quality, but we'll only know when we look at it. All right, here we are. Wow, look at that speaker. See what I mean about them harvesting speakers for full range systems? This is why. This thing is huge. Let's have a closer look. It's looking good. It's looking really, really good. There's our massive speaker, and it is full range. We can see the antenna, the ferrite antenna up here, rotator. And it seems to be rotating all the way around. I think it was probably hitting the back over here, because I could hear it scratching. It's not doing it now. So that seems to be working. Quite a massive power transformer here with voltage selectors. We've got 220, 150, 125. It's obviously set, or it is set to the 220 now. It's a little bit lower than what we have here. My voltage is 240, but this we can always work around that. I will be replacing the selenium rectifier, and I've got the MOSFET dropper now that I can adjust to get the B+ that I want. I've also learned from someone else a new trick to reduce, if you want to reduce the heater voltage slightly. I possibly will try that here as well and show you. There's a 1/2 amp fuse over there, which We'll have to see if it's intact or not. Not important at the moment. That is our output tube. I believe it's an EL84 and our output transformer. This, all this hardware is in immaculate condition. It's really in good shape. No rust anywhere. It's looking like it probably did when it came out of the factory. These IF transformers are really special. They're really, really well built. Not only do you tune the one side and the other, but you also adjust the proximity between them. In other words, the Q can be adjusted as well, if I remember correctly. So we have, as I said, we've got the power tube on there. I think this is the EABC 80. I'm not even sure what tubes this uses now, but this will be the detector, IF amplifier, and then on this end is where we'll have the mixer oscillator over here, the filter caps on there. This is the FM. The FM uses 2 tubes on this. I'd forgotten about that as well. Usually the more modern ones use an ECC 85. This thing uses 2 tubes. And let's see, this is working. Let's see how the FM is tuned. The FM on here is not tuned with the condenser, with the capacitor. It's tuned with a coil permeability tuning. So this thing, whoops, I've just messed it up. It's just come out of the pulley. When you turn, this pulls this down, and it actually pulls and pushes the plunger into a coil. So it alters the inductance of the coil rather than the capacitance of the capacitor in the tank circuit. Very common with these radios. I've seen a lot of that before. I know that the dial is broken, but that's the AM. I want to see what happens to the FM. Is it stuck? I'll have to have a closer look. I'm not sure that this thing is working at all. This may be clutching. I'm not sure anymore whether this is a clutch system or whether it is. Yeah, I'll have to check. I know this thing is here, so I'm not sure why it's not turning, but we can certainly discover that later. The point is, everything looks almost immaculate. There is a bit of broken plastic here. I'm not sure where this is from. I'll just put it aside and keep it. Something obviously broke. This looks like this is part of the piano keys. The innards of the piano keys must have cracked. That's the only thing with that color on here. And now I'm going to take this out of here so we can start working on it. I'll put it on my gadgets to be able to get access to the underside and everywhere else. I believe this thing is, yeah, this, I don't even need to desolder this because this thing plugs into the side here. You just unplug it. And the only thing that is actually tied down, that's not tied down either. So all you do is you unplug this and you remove 4 screws at the bottom and you pull this out. Good, that's what I'm going to do next, and then we can look at the underside and see what it is we're facing. Well, quite busy, as you can see. This is not your typical, GRUNDIG 2147 or something where you've got tons of space. This thing is pretty crowded, and this is a common characteristic of all the SABAs. There's a lot going on inside. If you are thinking over-engineering, you're right, and that's why I love them. They are definitely over-engineered. Let me show you a few of the things that are just over the top, and as I said, that's why I love them. Every one of these switches has a little light bulb underneath which illuminates them, and that gets switched on when the arm of the switch touches that point there. So it makes ground. So they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little light bulbs, and if I recall, I replaced these with LEDs in the previous iteration. But these switches aren't clicking properly. They're not grabbing properly. They should hold down. So some lubrication is probably necessary. This is also something I had in one of the previous ones. When you turn the tone controls, it moves that pulley, and that's what pulls and pushes that slider on that window to show you how far you've gone. So this is obviously stuck because it's going over there, so it needs to be loosened up. And the same applies for the treble control. We've got a typical selenium rectifier in here. This is one of the Siemens ones. That's going to be replaced, and I'll put in the MOSFET dropper, which rectifies and allows you to adjust the actual B+ voltage that comes out. You'll see that when I get to it. I did a project on that. And we've got a filter capacitor over here, but I noticed there's another one on the other side. So this thing's got two filter capacitors, but electrolytics, I see one there, one there, one there. So that's three. I actually thought there were more here, but that's three. Okay. And SABA loves these little switches. They usually have these switches in quite a few places. This is something that switches out the internal speaker, I believe. So when you connect an external speaker, it pushes that out and it switches out the internal speaker, so you don't have two in parallel, which is always a bit risky. If you have two in parallel, you can end up with half the impedance, which can overtax your output tube and your output transformer. So they actually cut it out. And there's a similar switch to this, which we probably be able to show you in the future. The antenna, the ferrite antenna, when you pull that knob out, it actually switches the antenna from external to internal. So again, these little details are things you don't normally get on these radios. I know TELEFUNKEN had a few bells and whistles, but these things are just, they are on a league of their own. Here's the tuning condenser fully enclosed. Again, not really usual. So it's shielded, just makes the radio less susceptible to noise. But what it does have, which is the bane of these radios, are these capacitors. These black ones, they're actually SABA branded. These guys are usually all bad. At least that's the experience I've had. When I say bad, it doesn't mean they necessarily open or shorted, but they are way out of value and leaking badly. So yeah, there are a lot of them, and some of them are in pretty hard to get places. So this is going to be fun. Well, that's why we do the hobby, right? To take on these challenges. Just looking for anything unusual here, because I tell you what I want to do. And this is one of those things, it's like the priest, do what I say, not what I do. I want to power this up very carefully. I want to see if we've got anything, because I don't know what the state of the tubes is. If we get noise, it'll tell me that the preamp and the power amp tube are fine, and that the output transformer is fine. Just so you know, I did test the output transformer and the power transformer already. The way I do them is I've actually got the series, the Back to Basics series, where I show how I do these things. I'm not going to show every little detail here, but if I've got a Back to Basics video that covers that issue, I'll point you to that. So I've checked the integrity of the output transformer and the power transformer. They seem to be fine. And so I'm going to link the Back to Basics series in the description below so you can look at that. The idea is to make this quite flowing for anybody who knows these things, and as detailed as it needs to be for anybody who wants to really learn. So you can go to the Back to Basics and get the full detail. I'm just, as I speak, I'm just looking around to see if I see anything dramatic, anything really unusual, and I don't. The tuning mechanism is rather unusual. You see, we've got the AM tuning here, which is that guy, and then the FM tuning is down here. And that is being tuned by the little rod on the inside of that shaft. So I've actually loosened the dial cord because it was really stuck, and it allows me to do that. So I can manually tune it. And what happens when you do that is you see this plunger come down. This plunger here is pushing the ferrite core into a coil, which is, well, it's called permeability tuning. And that allows you to adjust the tuning of the tank circuit. So this is all working. It's the dial cord itself for the pointer that's got some issues, which means if I can power this up and nothing blows, I can actually tune on FM by playing with this like that. Now there's no gearing, obviously, because I'm using my hand, but we should be able to see something, or hear something rather. So I'm going to do a few more checks to make sure that we're not going to get any bangs on here. And then I'm going to try and power it up with the dim bulb tester on maximum restriction and all that stuff. Again, I mentioned this in the Back to Basics series, but I want to hear something. I want to hear radio. I want to know that we are improving something rather than trying to bring it all back to life. It's always a good thing when it's basically working and you're just perfecting it, improving it, because it does need a lot of improvement. I've connected the speakers through that socket to the radio, and I want to make a correction. This thing has actually got two speakers. You see that? Those two go there, and another black and red go to the top, and the two more contact points on there. So I think this has got one of those tweeters inside the main cone. So this is not really a full range, but it does have the tweeter. I'm sure it's not electrostatic, but it is going into the back here somewhere. So when I take this out, we'll be able to see what the speakers look like. But we do have two speakers. All right, folks, I've set this up rather precariously, but I want to do this. I want to test this thing. And what I've got is I've got the dim bulb with a 40-watt bulb on there. So it's gonna come on bright, and I can't get you to see that because I've got the speaker here, the cabinet here, because I need the speaker. So we'll just listen to it, or listen for it. So let's see what it is we get if I power it up. I'm going to put this thing on medium wave if I can get it to latch. Oh, that doesn't help much. Well, FM is latching, so we'll try FM, but I've got to change the antenna here because I've got the mini whip coming in here to the AM antenna. Okay, mini whip is now, or the antenna is connected to the FM. Now, I don't expect much on FM because we've got a very tight restriction, you know, one light bulb, but let's put it on. I'm going to put it on. I'll tell you what the light bulb looks like now. Well, the bulb came on, but it's not full brightness, so there isn't a short. And I see that little light bulb there indicating FM is on. One of the dial lamps is on. One of them is burnt on this side. Put the volume up. I can hear noise. Hear that? With one light bulb, this thing is seeing 150 volts. I wonder, I've got to be very careful here. Nah. Very scratchy. That's to be expected. Let me put another light bulb on. In fact, I've put in 140 watts on there, so 3 light bulbs, because FM usually needs a little higher voltage. Whoa! Hear that? I'm trying to tune on this side manually. Listen to that. All right, I'm not going to risk it anymore. I'm putting it off. But that is brilliant news. Brilliant news. Right, what do we know? We know this thing is picking up on FM, which means our FM front end is probably perfect or fine. Now, obviously, there's a lot of noise, a lot of scratchiness, and that's got to do with the controls, the capacitors. I don't want to risk this much because there might be leakage into the output tube, so I don't want to risk that or the output transformer. I don't really hear a lot of hum, but I'm going to replace those filter caps anyway. A lot of the scratchiness could also be from bad switches. The switches are not latching properly. That means it needs lubrication. This thing is supposed to latch, and then when you push another one, it releases. The off thing here is completely loose. Some of these light bulbs, at least I know, are fine because the FM1 was lighting up. The audio is actually very loud and very good quality audio, so the speakers are great. Speakers are absolutely fine. The audio section, the preamp and the power amp seem to be fine, as is the output transformer, or we wouldn't have audio. So yeah, so we're starting from good news, which is always a lot more inspiring. So that's, yeah, I'm pretty relieved. Now, because I can't really latch the AM switches, I can't test the AM. I don't want to force it down. I could pull it down and put something behind there, but I don't want to do that. But I'll tell you what, if the FM is working, it means that the entire IF chain As far as the, let's see, we've got the IF amplifier. That must be working because that's the same IF chain that goes through there. One is at 10.7 megahertz. The other one is, I think, at 460 kilohertz for the AM. So that chain is working. It means that the detector tube, at least part of it, is working. I think it's an EABC80. Again, I haven't even looked at it. I've got the schematic. I'll be looking at that soon enough. But we know a big chunk of this is working. All the output to the speakers is working. This has told us a lot, a hell of a lot. In fact, if anything, testing the FM tells you more about the status or the state of that chain than it would the AM, because it also tells us that the FM block, that can at the front, is also working, and those two tubes seem to be working. So, yeah, I'm over the moon. I'm over the moon. This looks like it's going to be another SABA W3 that's going to come back to life. You can probably see that I've been busy. I decided to remove the dial glass because you never want to risk breaking it. That involved removing these two tabs at the top, and I've cleaned them. My cleaning frenzy came into play here. I sprayed that all down with isopropyl alcohol and a brush. So I've cleaned the knobs that aren't broken, and they came out beautifully. These are perfect. Those two have got some cracks in them, so they have been put aside to work on later. These two knobs were removed. They're in perfect condition, but I wanted to clean these pots, these tone pots. They're now perfectly clean, and I've also cleaned that cardboard was also cleaned out because it was really, really grubby. So this whole section has been cleaned up. I've lubricated the pots. I've lubricated the volume control as well, because I wanted to see whether the problem was in the, whether the crackling was actually in the pots. Well, sad to say, they weren't. I then thought perhaps, I also thought that perhaps they were in the switching. That's usually one of the causes of, crackling and noise. So I went ahead and I cleaned all the switches on the underside, sprayed them, activated them endless times to get this, to get the cleaning liquid in there. And I then tested it, and I still got that scrabbling noise, that real, those crunchy sounds. So that was not it. So then I went to the schematic and I went to look for capacitors, because I thought, actually before that, I did something else. One of the possible causes could be a tube. And so what I did was I replaced each one in turn. So I replaced the EL84 with one that I know is good. Crackling remained. When I say crackling, you'll hear it in a second. It's very loud. The EABC80, this is indeed an EABC80, so that was replaced, and it still wasn't there. When I say replaced, I put in a good one. If it's not that, then I put the original back in. So these two are back in. That one at the back there is the EAF42. It's not an EF89, it's the IF amplifier, but it's not the usual EF89. So I had one of those as well, put it in, it wasn't there, took it out and replaced the original. There's the ECH81, same story, not that. I tried the same with the FM tubes. This is what is that, an EF80 and an EC92 up here. Still didn't solve the problem. And then I figured, okay, it sounds like capacitor noise. A capacitor that's sort of sparking across, not shorted, but in bad shape. So I went to the schematic and I went to look at what the most likely ones would be. Now, bear in mind, I'm going to replace all the caps, the ones that need replacing, but I wanted to see if I could get rid of that right from the start. And I went to the schematic, and let me show you what it is that I've replaced, and then I'll show you what the result is. I found a full schematic and service manual for this. It's pretty complete. I think it's the same one that I used before. They're the alignment instructions. You've got all the dial chord instructions here as well. Make that easier to see. Yeah, dial chords are going to be fun because as you can see, there's quite a lot of detail on here. But anyway, the point is sticking to the schematic for a start. And my logic was this: if it's not the switches, if it's not the pots, the first place that I would look is at the output. Which capacitors could make this kind of noise? And there are three main ones here. This one here is the prime one that I always replace, because this is the one that feeds the signal from the preamp stage to the grid of the power tube. If this thing's leaking DC, you could get catastrophic blowout of the tube. So that was replaced. The other ones are, there are two here, And this one, for example, is 1 nanofarad, 1000 picofarads to ground. This is to cut off high frequencies, and this thing could create a problem. You've got a high voltage over here. You've got ground over there. If the cap was sparking across or something, it would make that kind of noise. So I'll replace that one. And then I also replace this one, which comes from the anode as well. And this has got to do with that external speaker, that the high speaker. And it does look like this speaker is actually connected to here. We'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'll replace those 3 capacitors just to see whether I got lucky, and I'll show you the result is, because ultimately what I'm going to do is the usual thing, which is I'm going to start with the power supply, make sure everything's good there. Then I'm going to go to the audio stage over here and the preamp over here, and then I go back onto the radio. But because I'm trying to get this thing to sort of work before I start, I decided to do all these little side steps, which aren't usually a good idea, but who says I've got to follow good ideas? Anyway, let me show you what the result of all these things were. I've got this little speaker connected. We'll leave this guy on, well, let's put it on phono, which means it shouldn't give us any noise. And I've switched it on, put the volume up. Now remember, all these tubes on here are still the originals. And here it comes. That definitely sounds like capacitor noise. Doesn't sound good. Let me try something else. Let me try and take the front end tubes out and see if it's before the preamp or after the preamp. So I've taken the ECH81. I'll take out the IF amplifier, and now we'll try again. So all it's got now are these 2 tubes. Of course, there's the FM tubes, but nothing's getting through there because the IF amplifier is gone. The volume pot is still scratchy. Still a little bit, but very little. Let me try and touch the phono input. Where is that? I can't even remember where that is. Is it here? Should be hearing a lot of hum, and I'm not. No, not that. Okay, back to the drawing board. All I've determined is that it's something prior to the audio preamp, but there's something strange. It's strange that I'm not hearing a hum when I touch the phono input at the back. Anyway, I'm not going to rush this anymore. This particular experiment was a bit rushed because I wanted to get the thing working. I know that the FM is working, which means that a lot of this is working. I know that the audio is working. So I now need to go back and get back to my normal routine, which is power supply, audio, and then radio. So that's my plan. And of course, all the capacitors are going to be changed, whether they are in the power supply or the audio section. I'll just replace all the caps as I go along. So I've got quite a bit of work to do. I must say that I'm really enjoying having one of these on the bench again. Love these radios, and I'm just hoping this one shows me some love as well. I hope you've enjoyed that, and if you have, do click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can do so on Patreon and PayPal. Links are in the description below. Once again, thanks for watching. Bye for now, and most of all, stay safe.